Okay, so Amber, starting with your question, given that social media can help to mass spread information, very true, what can health education specialists do to make information they tend to post seem legit? This is a great question, Amber, because I agree, we've got two things going on here. Number one, everyone's got an opinion and everyone seems to be voicing their opinion on the internet. That's
Yeah.
issue number one. Uh-huh.
Oh, nothing. I was saying, yeah.
Okay. And then thing number two is, which I am thoroughly guilty of, is that you go on the internet and you think something is completely legit, like some doctor or some, report, like it's a news article, and I'll watch this and go down this rabbit hole. And then at the end, they're like, well, and if you buy this, it's like, wait a minute, this was fake. So this is a conundrum that we potentially have. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, what do you think can be done to make the information look legitimate so that people perceive it as being a reliable source? Because what I do with you guys is, I'm constantly emphasizing in class, like in nutrition and stuff, that and same with this class, is that your quality sources are going to be researched, but even then you always have to look for bias, whether it's disclosed or it's referenced, and you have to ferret it out. We also want to look at government information, and then we want to look at information like Pew Research that's gathering data on Americans, and always, of course, cite those sources, but anything above and beyond those sources, so you've got your peer-reviewed research journals, you've got your government agencies, well, nonprofit agencies to some degree, but typically they get their data from the government, and then research like Pew. What else can we, when I tell people this all the time, they still go to other sources to gather intel, and it's like, no. So what is it going to take really for us to be able to communicate with people that we are a viable source of information? I'm curious to know what you guys have to say on this, because as a teacher, this is frustrating.
I wanted to add that I feel like a lot of people who do spread information on social media also do not know how to cite the right information. For instance, let's say they're getting information off a news site that they believe is right. They don't really know how to go deep into research to actually know what they're posting. So I feel like also understanding and learning about how to cite and do the sources is also on our part, which I feel like a lot of people don't do.
Or to tag on to that a little bit, Fatima, and maybe you're saying this and I apologize, but to make sure that they're even looking for sources that have citations.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's interesting. I went on to, I don't know if it was Dr. Axe or what's his name? Dr. Vile. I went on to one of those, all natural organic sites that love to espouse information about health and well-being. And it was fascinating because it references a research, that's, click here to learn more about our citations, where we got the info from. And I clicked on it and it took me to another one of his articles. So when I looked for the citation in that article, it took me to another article. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. It was all in a vacuum where all the citations were links just going from one to the other, I think really to deter people from investigating. Steady my beating heart. This is scary for me. All right, good. What else? Eileen, what are you thinking on this topic?
Can I add on?
Yeah, Amber, of course.
Okay. Kind of adding on to what she was saying, I definitely think that it has to do with citations, because I think a lot of times, like if you go on Twitter or even see someone post something on like Instagram or Facebook, a lot of times people just post their opinion, which like might be influenced by a source, but since there's a lack of citation or like further information that they provide to like whoever's following them, people kind of get muddled in like the opinions. Like you're just stuck between opinions and you don't know what's reliable or what's just like false.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that makes me think of something I did. Perfect. Um, it's a really great point. Is how do you know then what's the validation? And I think even bigger is that, as you mentioned, is that when you want to know more, you can't. It just stops there. Yeah, I need to go back and clean up my website for the other class. All right, excellent. And then is another way to combat this getting celebrities and endorsers to spread your same intended message so that their followers are more likely? Well, here's my question back to you, Amber. Is it about combating them, or do we need to actually enroll them in the topic and the importance of the topic, and enroll them in being spokespeople? And I think a really great example is when you look at someone, for example, like Princess Diana or Angelina Jolie, who became ambassadors of programs, uh, both of which were child focused. But finding, creating a cooperative with celebrities and asking them to be ambassadors for topics, to be spokespersons. It's kind of interesting, but this was before your time, but unless you've gone back and looked at it, I've been talking about this a lot lately because of relevance of pandemics. When Magic Johnson contracted HIV, I mean, he was, you know, bigger than life on his own, literally and figuratively. But this kind of shocked America because up to that point, there was a lot of attention to HIV as being a disease of homosexuality. And he completely, even though we knew it had the potential to go beyond that, that wasn't necessarily the case. That's where it was, evolving rapidly. And it shifted a lot of people's attention. And it wasn't that someone went to him necessarily. I mean, I don't know the personal particulars of that one if someone asked him to go public, but I would imagine that was a very personal choice driven on his own part to go public. But he directly or indirectly became the ambassador, the spokesperson of HIV is real for everybody. And that really made a powerful impact on people to understand that, I mean, does it capture all populations? No, because when you talk about things like your drug IV users, they may not have access to the same information. But when you talk about the general public, mixed public, meaning, I mean, at that point, the conversation was focused more on homosexuality as grouping all groups. It was mainstream conversation because it was sports, an athlete who brought this out into the open. So what about that possibility? Because it's one of those things where folks sometimes, if it's not that if you can't find them, fight them, join them, but it's more like if you can't, it would be spending too much energy trying to fight celebrities and what they present, and instead, or compete with their information, like their skinny teas and everything, and instead enroll them in being ambassadors and doing something positive for society. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this creates another question though, is and then how in the heck do you access celebrities? How do you open a conversation with them so that they're even willing? Because I don't know what it's like, honestly, to be a celebrity. And I don't, it's not something that I've ever pondered or honestly am interested in. But there's always that possible consideration that when people gain a lot of fame and attention, they are badgered by people constantly, starting with the paparazzi, and information is constantly manipulated, which means some people may be shy at the prospect of joining forces or being misrepresented or even talking to someone and quotes being taken out of context. I mean, we're in a very weird society, folks. It was kind of interesting. My husband was just telling me about this ship that got caught in the Suez Canal, and so they finally freed it after it created an incredible backlog. But the bizarre part that came out of it is that someone had there's this one ship captain out of Egypt who's a woman, and she's renowned because this is a field dominated by men. And she's very esteemed for her skills and being, I think, the first woman. But the interesting thing was someone had spoofed her Twitter account and posted that she was the one on the ship that got the ship stuck in the Suez Canal. And that's a really scary thought to think about, the potential of manipulation, that when people agreed. Yeah. Oh, hi, Maggie. I didn't know you were. Oh, hi, Maggie. I didn't know you were there. I'm sorry. How she did it on purpose. Yeah, this is really, a sad and bizarre scenario. Is that she was not even on the ship. She wasn't even in the region. She was on a ship somewhere else. But someone kind of set her up on social media as being the person who did this. And it's interesting because we're at a point in our society where this is possible, is that if you don't like someone or you politically want to take them down, you have the ability to spoof all their social media accounts and present information as if it's them, and create pictures and create videos. I mean, technology is so powerful today that this worries me, that, we want to use celebrities as to join forces with, but fear is going to follow this, that people are going to feel like they're ostracized. I'm watching this right now with celebrities in Hollywood and people who are getting cut from TV shows because they're not the right political following. Just bizarre. So this makes it harder for us, because how do we reach out to these people honestly and say, hey, we've got these statistics of this problem in the United States. So Maggie, borrowing from you, you've got maternal death from pregnancy. Interesting question. And we understand that, you were very open in public about having a very hard pregnancy, and we'd like to know if you would be willing to be a spokesperson for our community health education. I mean, at this point, it's a long shot. You give it a shot, but they may never even see your communication. They might have people in place to filter everything, which is challenging. All right. So couldn't using celebrities negatively affect campaigns too? Yes. And Maggie, your question is really powerful, because this is the part that's frustrating, you guys, is that we have become such a phenomenally polarized society that I'm watching all of this stuff going on across the nation. And I don't know, I'm like, I'm not quite sure right now. I'm trying to wrap my head around this, is that how can public health education fit into this forum, when, going back to what Amber said, is that when people are to the point where they don't trust anything and anyone, I mean, are they going to be willing, to come in and access information, or go to the internet and access information if we tell them it's there, if they're, one, based on Thursday's conversation, fearful that they will be completely exposed to everyone on what they're doing, and two, that they don't know if this information is trustworthy or if someone's trying to get something out of them. This is really weird. Really weird.
At that point, doesn't it just come down to finding the right person to be that spokesperson? Because I was gonna say, like, when COVID and everything first started, I remember for the longest they were trying to get like Kylie Jenner to say something about COVID-19 and like staying home or like wearing a mask and things like that. And like, yes, it's one thing for like a person like her to say something like that, because she has such a big following that I think people would listen to her. But then I think you can also look at like the lifestyle she leads, and like her family and her were traveling and going out. So I feel like there's always the good and the bad. So I think it depends on like finding the spokesperson that truly believes in what you want them to say, or who truly not even just says what you want them to say, but says something they want to say because they need to say it.
Yeah, which I think is, Amber, I think that's really powerful that when you said they need to say it, I think that there is, I mean, sometimes I think we're really clear when someone has strong convictions and they stand by them. There's that sense of passion that really comes through. In terms of a person who's saying that they believe in something, this is challenging, and I'm going to make a very political connection to this. Is that when you have, for example, the governor of California making decisions about masks, and then he goes out and publicly entertains people without masks on, the person's integrity now is gone.
Yeah.
Because so if Kylie Jenner, like you said, is saying, be safe, wear the mask, and then she goes to a party, and even if it's a private party and no one is supposed to know about it, but someone like Newsom got a picture of it, then that person's, for some people, they're going to be like, you're full of lies. But then other people are going to be like, hey, it's okay, she's human,
Yeah.
not worrying about the fact that where's the integrity in her statement. So this gets to be kind of hard, because the reality is this becomes you can't please all the people all the time. And this has always been the challenge with human beings. Usually there's more cohesiveness in society. And right now, this fabric of our social norm is unraveling very quickly. So it's getting to be harder. It's interesting. And kind of an example is, oh God, what's his name? What's his name? Harry.
Styles.
Yes. My daughter loves Harry Styles, and she's been following him like crazy, but she's starting to notice these strange inconsistencies, starting with the fact that, that they were supposed to have a concert early last year and it got canceled because of COVID,
Yeah.
but she put a lot of money out into those tickets against her mother's advice. And they never rescheduled, they never gave the money back, they never anything. And then he kept scheduling more concerts and did the same thing to other people. And she talks to people all over the world around this. And his, in her eyes, his credibility has gone down as this, spokesperson for the things he speaks out for, because she just basically is fine. She needs that money. If she's not going to be using it there, then she needs to reroute it because of COVID now to other things. And she feels kind of like this super wealthy person now has just totally, had the attitude of who cares? You bought the ticket. Who cares if I perform or not? But then other people that she talks to are like, I don't care. I'll keep buying the tickets every time they announce them. And then each time the shows get canceled, she's like, didn't you think getting burned once was enough? They're like, no, it's okay, because someday he will perform. Do you guys know what that is? That's an addictive personality. And so, kind of, Amber, speaking to what you were saying, that I think there are some people who they're so forgiving that they just will always follow the person no matter what,
Hmm.
and make excuses for everything they do. But then you're going to have that, again, that division where some people are going to look at them and say, that person's full of it. I'm not, and that, the sad part is that when that person associates with a program, now the program is tied into the integrity of that person. And,
Yeah.
I wish that weren't the case, but it is. Because,
That's why I definitely think it has to do with the like picking the right person or reaching out to the right person, because like the example you gave of like Princess Diana, or I even think like Michelle Obama, like people that are going to follow through with their words rather than say something and like expect people to follow it but then not follow it themselves. Like you
right,
need to find people that are willing to like fight for the cause basically.
right, and stay with it,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's I think what that boils down to, Amber, these are really great points, is it's about vetting people, really looking at, it's funny because we would be reaching out to them for help, but at the same time we need to trust them, but at the same time verify by looking at their resume of activity and determining, are they the right fit for us? Not just are we the right fit for them, right? So for Maggie's pregnancy, it's not just going out and finding someone who is a good representative, but really, is there this two-way street on that agreement that it really makes sense? Really awesome thoughts. I love that you guys are thinking of this. It's really cool. All right, is another way to, did we already talk about this? Is another way to combat this getting celebrities and endorsers to spread your same intent message so that their followers are more likely to follow and accept the information? Well, and something you have to take into consideration is that is your information necessarily appropriate for those followers? So, I mean, obviously then getting back to the idea that if you're choosing the right person, in theory, they're going to have the right following. But okay, here's a weird one. Is if you were to, I'm making connections, and please don't take any of this literally. I want you to take it figuratively. That what if in the case of Maggie's, you know, prevention of maternal death, she focuses on there's two types of, let's say, celebrities. She could focus on one celebrity who is pro-choice and one celebrity who's pro-life. Actually be really cool to have both, because then you'd get two completely separate communities who are highly divided in being able to convey that communication of how important healthcare is during the pregnancy period. But there is that possibility that if for some reason, you know, even though you have the spokesperson, if people are in vision of that and they feel that it's somehow being misrepresented, then it has the potential of going sideways, or you're not reaching the correct audience with a celebrity that you think is representing the information that you want to convey.
Couldn't it be a problem though doing that? Because if you have a campaign that's like supporting both sides, right? You have like someone who's speaking from the pro-life angle and then someone from the pro-choice angle. And if people from opposing views see that you're doing that, working both sides, then wouldn't it ruin the credibility of your whole campaign anyways?
Well, it depends on how you approach the campaign. I mean, if you keep the emphasis only really tightly on the maternal health and make no reference to anything about like saving her life because of complications in the pregnancy, or about how she became pregnant or why she's avoiding health care. If you, as that's, you know, when I talked about the creep, that means literally keeping yourself really in check on the topic. So there is absolutely no creep, nothing else that could be pulled into that conversation. Then I think you could successfully accomplish that. But that's a girdle on the information, holding it in really tightly. It's, you know, it's kind of weird, but you guys, the bottom line is that, you know, this goes back to, I think it was the 80s when spin doctoring really came up. It's a lot of it has to do with how you spin information, how it's presented. Okay. I'm just reading Amber's comment. All right, so the next one, how can social media infiltrate a public health perspective without misinterpreting the information? Well, what do you guys think? I have an immediate thought on that, but who knows if I'm reading the question correctly. What do you think? How can social media infiltrate a public health perspective without misinterpreting information? Anything? Okay, silence kills. So you have to, if you have no opinion or you're like, I have no idea, then state it. If you have a random thought, vomit it out there, go for it. But the silence, you guys have to understand, when I have black screens and you guys are not saying anything, my story, my interpretation is that you are not there.
How are you interpreting the question? Because I feel like the word infiltrate is throwing me off.
Welcome to my world. Okay. How I interpret this question is, how can social media infiltrate a public health perspective? So, how can, I interpret this as, how can social media represent information, you know, for the public health without misinterpreting the information? How can it be presented out there? So that's how I look at it. And I have no idea, honestly, if it's anything otherwise. But the bottom line is, it's what you put out there is what you control. And if you put information out in social media, then you make it really clear that you are the responsible party for the education, not as established in the beginning, not an opinion, not a blog, but this is where you come to access education, and making references to things like, we are a nonprofit agency, a mission statement. We are a nonprofit agency committed to the, let's say, the reduction of of uh, substance abuse in the teenage community. You know, something that states very blatantly how to access them and what they stand for, rather than, you know, by law, officially, anything that is a commercial is supposed to be referenced in very tiny print, that it's a promotional piece by law. I'm not sure what all is being executed, but normally I'll notice some ads and they'll have that tiny print. So does that, I mean, I don't know. Do you guys have any other interpretation of that?
Maybe like resharing CDC like websites, or like on Instagram, for example, you can share certain posts that they have
Mm.
and they're credible to, you know, your followers. So it's not really your opinion or your information. You're getting it from the right source. So that's the way I
Fatima. Yeah, so what you're saying is, bottom line is that if social media, whether it be someone from an agency or someone out there in the world, is that if they're kind of like going back to that conversation in the very beginning, is that if a person is citing real sources, then you have the trail to follow. You know that it's provides something of quality and differentiates it from being um, an editorial, right? Or
Yeah.
okay, got it. Okay, do you guys have any other thoughts on that one? It's kind of interesting. I'm gonna start having to ask you guys to like thumbs up, thumbs down. My mind reading skills have not been that sharp lately. Okay, Amanda Kims, according to social media policy, there is content that can and cannot be shared. What determines this, and are there any specific guidelines or rules to keep in mind? Yes, I agree, Maggie. What do you guys think? Maggie, you should know this 100% from your position, and anyone else who's in healthcare should know this answer. This is
You can't share any personal information or personal health stuff like HIPAA laws.
exactly. So this is really important to understand about HIPAA laws. You cannot reveal information that can be tied to a person directly, or that is a personal nature regarding that person. So, you know, I can make reference. It's like when I talk about my patients, I can make reference to, you know, the idea of, I have a patient who has been challenged by, which is common in this field. Then it's like, you know, it's a little more of an educational tool that we're using versus saying, I have this patient that did this, this, and this. Wow. You know, it is, I have to admit, there's a little bit of a fine line when you use case studies as um, educational tools. But the key is you always have to make sure that whatever you reveal cannot directly be tied back to the person. But that being said, the question is, you know, when you're using social media, why, I don't think there would ever really be a time for you to share personal information about anyone unless you were to generate a case study. And at that point, in such a public form, that case study should be really, uh, uh, really should be fabricated based off of facts, but not individual facts. It could be accumulated across other people. So for example, in the 301 class, I provided 2 case studies for the midterm, and those case studies completely fabricated in my head, but they're based off of my experience of people I've interacted with over the years, both at the university level and at Kaiser, and prior to that in my personal counseling. So we have to just be really careful, is that when we draw ideas, that's what we take away and not the specific facts. Okay. Are there guidelines or rules to keep in mind? That would be, as Maggie referenced, that would be following the HIPAA rules. Absolutely. And the only time I honestly feel that would come up would be in the case of case studies, if you were to, for some reason, use a case study in social media. Okay, any other thoughts on Amanda Kim's question?
I think her question kind of ties into the next question where they say, what are other ways that health-related misinformation can be controlled or stopped? And the comment I wanted to make to both of them is that I know on Instagram, if people tag like or use the hashtag of COVID-19 or things like that, and like obviously there's people that are like for and against the vaccine or like for and against masks, so on and so forth. And I think that Instagram does a good job in like kind of reminding us that like we need to look further into it, because I know like they'll blur out the post and say like you need to like, basically it gives you a warning like this mentions COVID-19, remember to like, I don't know the exact words, but basically it says like remember to look further into this, like don't trust this as like verbatim truth.
Now, here's my question though, and this is the part that disturbs me, is are they making this reminder for all posts, or are they singling out specific posts?
That was my concern too, because I know with Facebook, it's very one-sided. And I was thinking about that, how in the book it was saying most older people for social media sites, they focus on Facebook, but then thinking about like political views and stuff, a lot of people who are more conservative are like, don't trust the news you see on Facebook. So that's what I think about all that. I don't know if I would trust it anyway.
This is my concern, and it's, you know, it's kind of interesting because I don't know if you guys remember, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but a few years ago he came to Cal State Fullerton, and people were up in arms, and they had all of this, you know, they were having all this police presence on campus, and they cordoned off the whole area. And he was a very controversial speaker with Republican ideals. Were you there? Do you remember who I'm talking about?
I don't remember his name,
No.
but I remember being there because they had like the whole TSU boarded up and stuff.
Right. Okay. So it was very interesting because I remember observing that, not really knowing who he was or anything about him, but I was really, and I can't remember if he ended up speaking at Cal State Fullerton, but I think he did. And I think then other universities ended up banning him and not allowing him to speak. And then I was at Chapman, and I went and attended, we were given tickets to attend a presentation by a journalist. And I was gobsmacked. I mean, the information she presented, I think my daughter had to resuscitate me because I was horrified by what I was learning about journalism. But the point was, it's interesting how it is getting to the point where the open communication of both sides is starting to be filtered and controlled. And I like to look at every angle possible. This is the thank you philosophy undergraduate. I like to weigh everything, and then I like to make the decision for myself. And kind of like what Amber and Maggie, what you're both saying is that I'm starting to I don't go on social media anymore because I was starting to see a bias where some information was blotted out as being indicated as potentially being a problem, and then other information that I was reading going, this is really out of context, kind of like when people would say, oh, coconut oil is really good for you, and I'm going, what's going on here? And that information was being left out there and no one was filtering it. So I don't believe in censoring, okay? Because that's the whole thing of freedom of speech in the United States. And people say things I do not like. Do not get me wrong, all right? People do things I do not like. But how can you ever learn if you're only allowed to see one side? So Amber, in terms of the censoring, I hope that what they did, because I don't go on there, is I hope what they did is presented the banner as a reminder regarding all posts.
As far as I'm aware, it was like, it was just anyone that would like use the tag. It would be like a pre-censor saying like, this may or may not be true. Make sure you do your own research. It
Got it.
wasn't like they were like removing people's posts. It was just more of like, we're not liable for what these people are saying. Make sure you know what's right in your own, like for your own beliefs. Do
Good.
you get what I'm saying?
Okay, good, because this is an important thing to take into consideration is that what if our public health information started getting censored? What if our society decided that it's inappropriate to talk about teenage pregnancy, or that we're not allowed to talk about drug addiction among seniors, or we're not allowed to talk about the opioid crisis in America? Or what if we're not allowed to talk about uh, social media bullying on social media? I mean, this is a concern I have, because when censorship does start, folks, it won't stop. And public health will eventually get swooped up into that, just the same as you watch different administrations. They all have their different policies, and I totally get it. It's looking at, it's two different sides of the coin and looking at life at two different perspectives. And you know in some administrations, Planned Parenthood has money, and in some administrations the attitude is that Planned Parenthood should get that money privately and not publicly, and it goes back and forth according to the administration. But the concern is that what if we create a coalition with Planned Parenthood, and then they get censored? Then it's like we get pulled into that. It's like a fishing net. We get swooped up into it also. So this is, I mean, you guys are coming into a time where public health is really going to be swept up in a lot of this information, or approaches to communication in our society. And it's going to be important for us to really stay on our feet in terms of foreseeing I like to say, what's coming down the pike, to keep our eyes open to what the momentum is in society, because it will inevitably work its way into our arena also, and what that means for us in terms of communication and public health. Oh my goodness, and is it ever? All right, misinformation relating to health is spread through different social media platforms, and health education specialists report the potential health information. What are other ways that health-related misinformation? Okay, so we pretty much talked about that. Is the idea of disclaimers, kind of semi-disclaimers, like you were talking about, Amber, of saying, hey, rethink about this. But that means then, the one catch with this in terms of asking social media to monitor this is they become the police of the information, and they write the algorithms if they choose to, or it becomes dependent on the agency, the public health agency, to troll the internet looking for this information and report it. It becomes a challenge, you guys. And this is the hard thing with the internet, is that it's hard to manage. And that's part of why I want you guys to watch that video, is to really start thinking about who's controlling all this information. And the idea of control can be good, things like the FDA overseeing food quality, but then the idea of putting that control into individuals' hands, like when we talk about supplements, has the potential of going sideways. So I'm already battling this in the world of food and supplements. That's been a losing battle so far. All right, one of the most effective ways to build an audience on social media is to post regularly. Absolutely. And remind me, why is that so darn important to post regularly, ladies?
Didn't they say that the posts get washed out after a couple of hours or something?
Yep, absolutely. So you have to keep touching the internet over and over again so that people have the opportunity to see it. I mean, you've got people like me who go on, once in a blue moon, and then you have people who are living on it 24/7. So that does mean it's interesting, because I'm starting to find that a lot more organizations are hiring people to do nothing but manage their social media presence. And that means they have to constantly be touching everything possible that's appropriate, and then keep it fresh so that for the people who are on all the time, they don't ignore it, that they keep touching it. And then for people who are touching it once in a while are able to access quality information versus it being boiled down. Actually, good question, Amber. Uh, and sorry, Maggie, going back to your statement. Yeah, Facebook has decided that they have determined what they feel is free speech. Scary. And do billboards and advertisements count as social media? They do not, because social media does need to be is really in its name, which is social, the ability to interact with people. And billboards are very linear, they're one-sided. So it is there to present information and then that's it. And same with advertisements, whether it be print or television, it's still one-sided. But in social media, on the internet, even when you have these ads that pop up, you can have, it's a little bit of a hybrid because you have the ability for someone to click on it to access the information, but there's no social setting for people to interact around that topic. So that's why utilizing things like blogs can be really powerful, because you could present a lot of really good information and then have people talk about it. Connected to the blog, or if you're utilizing things like, you know, the Instagram and the Facebook, and then our new forums that are coming out to cover all aspects of the world, Parler and whatever else is coming. So yeah, so the key takeaway, folks, please remember, is social media has to be media that is around social interaction between people. Okay, Maggie, did you have a thought?
Yeah, just on the social media fatigue, one of my coworkers sells like nail strips and stuff, and she said you can actually schedule posts to go, so she doesn't have to do it all week long constantly, and she can check in on the weekends when she has time or whatever. So I think that's an option too.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's kind of interesting because I didn't even know this. My daughter told me recently that even, well, I can do this in Canvas. I can schedule when I send out my announcements, but even emails can be scheduled as to when you contact people. At Kaiser, we are using texting as a form of communication to remind people about their education classes, just as we remind people about appointments. And same thing, that you have that ability to schedule it. So yes, I agree, Maggie, that you do have the ability in social media to schedule the releases, but part of your job is not only going to be developing the material and putting it out there, but you also need to troll the information to find out who else is putting what out there. Is it agencies that are competing with you? Is it people who are making supportive comments that, you know, you might want to reach out to them and connect with them? Is it people who are making derogatory statements that you might need to do damage control? So I appreciate the idea. It does help, oh my gosh, with time management. However, it's not like you can set it to go and walk away and then be like, oh, it's okay, I'll check in a week. There's other aspects of it that you have to constantly manage, especially as things go sideways today. All right, as mentioned in the chapter, social media fatigue is experienced among many social media creators. I have a friend who does this, actually, as her profession. And yeah, she does burn out. Where do you think the balance lies between posting regularly enough to build a loyal audience without reaching a fatigue? Well, and you want to think about it, fatigue, not just from the person who's posting, but also the person who is receiving the information. Like, you guys tell me, have you ever seen something on the internet so many times you just want to vomit? It's like, really? Enough. I'm tired of seeing this. I mean, I can tell you, I feel that way about different political stuff. I can't stand election time because it's just constantly telling me, you have to vote this way, you have to do this. And I'm like, I don't have to do anything. Leave me alone. Yeah, election was awful. No, we're not, Maggie. We are not out of the woods, just to warn you guys, because there's the Senate race is coming up in 2022. It's not done. Yeah, it is. It's an incredibly stressful experience, and I agree. And, and this is the thing is that whenever there's going to, it's like, I think this is part of the problem with COVID is that we have to some degree experienced a form of COVID fatigue because number one, I've considered a yo-yo experience that it's like you can go in public, you can't go in public. You can go out to eat, you can't go out to eat. You can go back to work, you can't go back to work. I mean, I got so tired of being told to go back to Chapman and then come back home. It was like, oh my God, I just don't want to go back to work anymore. Let me teach at home forevermore. So, whenever we switch information on people or we over bombard them, switching information gives fatigue because then people are just like, whatever. And that's why we have to be very careful and consistent in our message. But when you've got a consistent message, but you're bombarding people over and over again, then one, they have the potential of experiencing fatigue and they shut down and they stop listening to it. And then when they stop listening to it, it becomes a mindless event and they no longer apply it. Problem number one. Problem number two is that you have that potential of, which is basically a form of brainwashing where, depending on the quality information, you are now influencing people to the point where they're not thinking for themselves of, oh, is this appropriate? Oh, does this make sense? Because it's almost like they've got this fear built into them that they have to follow it no matter what. I have this problem with a lot of my people, older people at Kaiser, is, a lot of them have said flat out, and this is what scares me is they say, I'm not going out until I get my COVID shot. Okay. I got it. I get it. That's great, because they're really looking at the COVID shot as being the end all. But the thing people seem to forget is that influenza virus mutates. This is the nature of a virus. This is why every single season we have different strains that pop up and why we keep getting new shots. But every year we get a shot, it's like a crapshoot. We're choosing a strain that we think we've started seeing activity in, and that's the one we run with. And I've had people say, oh, it's okay, I can do whatever I want now. I have the COVID shot. And I'm looking at them, I'm saying, no, you can't. Whether you have the COVID shot or not. You wash your hands, you don't stick your fingers in your eyes, your nose, or your open wounds unless you wash your hands first. Whether you have the COVID shot or not. So sometimes that fatigue causes people to brainlessly follow the information, and that can be dangerous also. I'm not a fan of fatigue. I'm a fan of keep things fresh, interesting, and intelligent so that people are forever thinking rather than shutting down. All right, and so where do you think the balance lies between posting regularly enough to build a loyal audience without reaching a fatigue? And that's a good question. I actually, I want to hear from you guys is that, what is it? Is it the timing, the information? Is it the arena of information being expressed? So that, it would be so exciting, the idea of creating public health education about diabetes prevention so that people actually want to participate, want to read it, and want to follow it and practice it in their own lives. I mean, that's a following, okay? That's where people are adapting, or rather adopting the information and adapting it to their lifestyles. That's like my dream. But from your perspective, where do we find that balance? So that we create the following, we have the consistency of information so that people do take it on, but not to the point where they tune out.
I think that it's more about just being able to post regularly to build the following because I think it depends more on like, I don't think it's necessarily how like the time between your posts. I think it's posting enough that people are going to see and get your message. Like, I think it also has to do with being on different social media platforms. Like, you can't religiously just say, oh, I'm just going to post stuff on Instagram because you're only going to get so much of a following from there.
Mhm.
I think if you use more different social media outlets to spread the information you're trying to spread, you're going to get more people from different walks of life to see what you're trying to teach them or like get them to think about.
Also, to add on to Amber, I feel like creating a schedule, as in, like, let's say for Instagram, you do a few days of the week and then you switch off to Facebook or Twitter, or like just creating an organization pattern where you don't feel fatigued or overwhelmed, because this is technically a job. Like, people hire people to, spread social media platforms. So it's something really big and important and needs time and effort. So I feel like a schedule really puts a lot of work into it and helps organize it.
Something to consider also is that when you do something like that with a schedule is creating kind of little, almost like gimmicks. You know how you say that like meatless Monday, right? Is creating some type of little marketing phrase that almost ramps up excitement for people to look for that day of the week for your release of information. And this is where I said earlier on, in the semester at some point is that, or maybe it was regarding PSAs, that we really need to take pages out of the marketing industry's books of how to get people's attention and how to keep pulling them back so that they want to find out more. Sometimes that means almost like a novella, or like a series of chapters where you reveal a little bit of information in a topic or a story, and then you continue it next week, but you have to have a hook so that people want to come back and continue with the information or the story. So maybe it's that you do the story of a case study, and it, in exploring the topic, and then say to, we'll, continue this conversation next week of how to solve this problem, and people buy into the, the identify with the case study, and they want to know more as to how to address that problem, and they wait for next week to continue with the story, just like a TV show. So it is forever going to be, you know, as honorable as the public health field is, we've gotta use skills from other arenas. And that being said, this is something I'm going to tell you guys, is that every ounce of work that you do in volunteering, even when you do not perceive it as being directly public health related, it will come back and apply. And I speak from experience because, my working in the food industry obviously built me up towards dietetics. My working in the financial industry and project management built me up towards dietetics. My working in the film industry worked me into dietetics, because everything that you do, every skill that you develop, you're going to want to take from those other arenas and apply it to your career. Because the more outside knowledge and experience you have, the more variety you can add to this conversation. So it's not linear, but so that you're able to analytically look at all the different possibilities and bring tools in from those other arenas to apply to this situation. And I can't emphasize that enough. Really important. Okay, I see we just lost Eileen. All right. And let's see, loyal audience. Are we complete with Jamie, folks? Do you think enough loyal audience with reaching fatigue or feeling the need for lost power content just to continue posting frequently? I think that we're complete with that one. Okay. Paris asked, what happens if you go against social media policy? And then what are the guidelines or rules to post on social media? Those guidelines are posted. You actually would have to go online and investigate what the rules are to the organization. Maggie, you're funny. Yeah, you have to go in and you have to look. And the concern is, folks, this is the biggest problem that we have, and especially in a society right now where they are making up the rules on the fly. And it's very worrisome. So in a situation like this, when you're using social media as a forum, you will investigate what the rules are to post on social media, but you cannot take that as a end all. You have to as part of your due diligence, determine how frequently you go back and review those rules and look for changes. Officially, they should be notifying users of any rule changes, but honestly, as you guys all know from your experience, information gets lost, whether it be it goes out into the cyber black hole somewhere, or human oversight, whatever it is, or human oversight on their end where they failed to do something. Yet you will be penalized for it because those are the rules. So in that case, if you're ever utilizing social media as your forum for communication, and the odds are extremely high, you will want to review those policies maybe on an annual basis to make sure that they are aligned, because if they block you, one, that's going to look really bad. That's just, that's a hit, whether it was intentional or not. It's a hit to your integrity publicly. And number two, that, it disrupts your continuity of information to the public that you're reaching out to, which is a double whammy. All right, for Wendy, how do government agencies deal with data breaches? Yeah, to ensure, this is complicated. How do government agencies deal with data breaches to ensure confidential patient information doesn't get released to the general public? Okay, two things. Number one, because of HIPAA laws, you do have to have, you are supposed to have really good integrity in your data protection. However, we do know the most important thing is that hackers are evolving faster than protective software development. And this is why we're seeing data breaches constantly on things like the personal health information in insurance companies. We're looking at it in the financial industry, you name it. And this gets back to why I'm looking at this video for Thursday, is that it's out because it's not just your personal health information and your social security and your address and your phone number and everything else. Okay. It is the possibility is that when they write these algorithms, they are collecting information. It's fascinating. They're collecting information on how long you spend on a web page, on where your cursor is going, what you're indicating is of interest. Yeah. Oh, Maggie, she already fell off. Which means they have gotten to the point where the algorithms can predict what information you want to see next, and they choose what you're going to see. So they're filtering information and determining what it is you want to access. And this has been only recently that I've been seeing this come up more powerfully, because I'll look at one video when I'm doing research on stuff, and all of a sudden, and then I have a couple other things I'm looking at for personal and school and stuff. And then when I go into YouTube, I'm noticing it's not a continuity of the topic like it used to be, where let's say if I'm looking into STDs, then all of those YouTube videos should be STDs. But now I've got like my international news sources that I'm watching, and I've got the STD information, and I've got, information about athletics, and all these other things are filtering in, partially because I teach so many classes, but all this information is filtering in, and they're determining now what I'm going to look at, even though I didn't ask for some of those topics. So it's the government agencies aren't nearly the issue as the private sector. And deal with what? This is all being decided without our knowledge or participation or agreement. And this worries me, because if you do go to click on information to learn more about something, once they access that information, they have the potential to sell it to anyone, and the whole frigging world knows. And who cares what the world knows? But it's how that information filters back to is when it becomes a problem. I mean, like, what if you're looking into baby stuff, and then they keep filtering your baby stuff, and then your baby gets killed? I mean, what a frigging trigger. And it won't stop, and it'll keep coming back over and over again. So sorry, that was a really morbid example. It just makes me think of a family that lost all their children. I've never forgotten them. Okay, social media has the power to disseminate quick information on any topic, but what are some tips that can be given to the general public to ensure they are not picking up unreliable information? You know, that boils down to the trust but verify folks that you guys were talking about. Amber, you made a really good point, which is, you know, citing your sources. Now, a lot of people don't know how to read and identify quality sources, which is why Dr. Vile's website cracked me up, is because, you know, I have a friend who is really cool and I love him dearly, but he believes the weirdest stuff because he's like, oh, well, he's a doctor. He's a PhD. Who cares? My daughter has a PhD in torturing me. It makes no difference. I'm sorry. You know, oh my God. Okay, I'll just be quiet. Mm-hmm. All right. So what are the tips is you guys tell me. We talked about the idea of citing sources, and I stand by, I tell people repeatedly, government agencies and yeah, oh gosh, okay, yeah. And then research, looking at research, but always forever keeping an eye on, does the research hone in? Okay.
I think with that though too, some people they still don't realize what counts as like credible sources, because I meet people like when I was out in Alabama, they still think like looking at YouTube, that's credible, or looking at like Wikipedia or something, which is more credible than YouTube, I think. But like, I was kind of blown away by like, you know, like what they would say, like they would tell me something. And I'm like, well, where'd you hear that? Like a YouTube video. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't really count. So
it's Wikipedia, I actually consider to be worse because YouTube, I think, is great because it presents information. And I mean, yeah, you should be able to vet it first to identify what it is. And always start with the idea that like it's the possibility of not there as gospel, but there to spark conversation and ideas. But I find that people look at Wikipedia as a source, and Wikipedia, because it is crafted by individuals who have determined the information. And sometimes they cite decent sources, and sometimes the citations are like, are you kidding me? Where did you get that from? I would actually put Wikipedia pretty much at the bottom of the barrel. This is, you know, Maggie, to speak to what you're saying, is that I think the most important thing is to teach people how to critically think, to question, does this make sense? And part of that comes from giving them the foundational knowledge. But the question is, how do they access the foundational knowledge? And that's why we try to pull them into our community health education, is to give them, you know, like for me, when I teach at Kaiser, I have coworkers who just present the information, and I refuse to do that. I teach people why we're saying this. And then I tell people, now you go make the decision that's best for you. Because we really have to teach them how to discern fact from fiction. And why? Because what I've found is that our school systems are not teaching people anymore how to analyze. And this is hard for us, because that means that as less and less people know how to analyze and be critical thinkers, then they're going to continue to believe that, you know, if someone makes some crazy statement, they're going to believe it as gospel. Dreadful. Okay, Maggie, as a request for your going over the assignments, I'm going to stop here, folks, and then I'm going to record based off of the assignment so that I can share that with everyone.